I don't see people that buy a new construction condo or home and close on it and the property is worth more than they paid. I don't see them coming back to the builder and saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you charge me more because it's now worth more?
Right.
No.
Hey, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back to the Real Estate Podcast. This is episode 328. And today we're talking about new construction condos not appraising, buyers walking away from contracts, the repercussions you could face, and the solution that might help you put the deal together.
Welcome to the Real Estate Podcast, your go-to source for raw, unfiltered stories and expert tips. Whether you're a buyer, seller, tenant, landlord, or realtor, join us as we dive into the world of real estate.
Today we are talking about condos that are not appraising and buyers. These are pre-construction condos, or could be pre-construction anything.
I was just going to say, are we talking about condos specifically?
Well, in this particular story, it was a pre-construction condo.
Are you referring to the Globe and Mail article?
Yes, where the gentleman walked away from it because he deemed he was losing less money that way. And this is a common thing that's happening because appraisals are coming in too low. Buyers can't get financing. And we need to discuss the potential repercussions of that, which are very real and very serious, potentially, and the potential solution for people that may be stuck in the same position.
Let me just read the first paragraph or so. And this article was published in the Globe and Mail on February the 9th by Rachel Youngley. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. During the real estate frenzy in late 2020, Joe, we'll call him, decided to buy a $2.195 million pre-construction condo in his tree-lined neighborhood of Leaside in Midtown Toronto.
It's an expensive condo for Milton.
I know. That would buy half the building. He provided the developer with a deposit of $439,000, the equivalent of 20% of the purchase price. His two-bedroom place with a grand view of the city was on the 5th floor of an 8-floor condo building. Blah, 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 blah.
How do you have grand views of the city from the 5th floor?
Documents. Well, actually, a lot of those condos.
Where is a hill?
But hang on, a lot of those condos, the 5th floor is actually pretty high up because you've got amenity floors and potentially entrance to the garage. So your 5th floor could be like the 10th floor.
No, 5th floor is 5th floor.
No.
I've never.
No, a friend of mine who I think you were at his condo years ago, at 18 Young.
Yeah.
The first floor where the condos are really like the 5th, 6th floor because they have their rooftop terrace area and amenities on that floor and then the pool on the floor below.
I've never experienced that.
Anyways, so the guy bought this condo for $2.195, and when it came time to
when did he buy it? I think in 2020.
Oh man, you don't listen? I just said it. During the real estate frenzy in late 2020.
Right, that's why I remember 2020. I knew it was in there somewhere.
When the building was nearing completion, Joe went and got the property appraised in order to secure a mortgage. The appraisal came back at $1.6 million, 27% below his purchase and sales agreement, which means he was on the hook to bridge the $595,000 gap, which is that gap between the original purchase price and the appraisal price.
Not to be confused with bridge financing.
Well, essentially, he may have needed bridge financing, but that's like a reverse bridge.
Yeah.
That's fucking London Bridge is falling down, buddy.
Yeah, that's huge. But those numbers are common. 20 to 30% is common from the height of the market to where we're at.
For condos in Toronto, certainly.
Yeah. Well, even resale homes. So it says in his calculations, he was saving money by doing this. Well, if you're saving money, that means the builder's losing money. So the risk you run when you back out of a deal, you default on your contract, is that you can't just walk away and wash your hands and say, oh, you take my deposit, we're done with it. If the builder is on the hook to potentially lose money, so when they go to resell it now,
They have mitigated damages.
right. So that could be carrying costs. It could be selling for less money. Who knows? All these things added up.
Marketing to now resell it.
Yep. And sellers and builders have sued buyers in these scenarios and recouped those expenses.
Yeah, they've won.
Yeah. Almost always, I'd say. It's like very justified.
It's a
So
if that commitment didn't exist, it potentially doesn't get built.
right.
So you're on the hook.
Yeah.
Shit,
it's
shit end of
happening-
the stick, but
it's-
you're on the hook.
It's happening so much now.
I don't see people that buy a new construction condo or home and close on it, and the property is worth more than they paid. I don't see them coming back to the builder and saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you charge me more because
that
it's
would-
now worth more?
Right.
No.
So that would be like the builder, pursuing them for extra money.
Right.
But this is happening so frequently that, well, you had one recently, new construction condo close, where before closing, the builder called you and said, does your buyer intend to close?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's so common that
Right.
builders are proactively finding these deals that are going to fall apart.
Right.
Because they need to get ahead of it.
And the builders recognize that, oh shit, it's not worth what we sold it for. So we may have issues with contracts not being able to get funded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
There are a couple of lenders, I won't mention names because that's always changing too. But there are a couple of lenders that may be working with your builder if you've purchased a new construction and you're listening to this. And they have it's kind of like a blanket policy. It's an agreement agreement. They will fund based on the original purchase price.
So, well, we can say RBC was one of them that we're aware of. I don't know the details surrounding it. In one particular scenario, it was just a person was in a bad position at closing. The bank they were approved through wasn't appraising properly. They couldn't do much to help them out. RBC got it done based on the purchase price. But I don't know if there might be stipulations that say, or I think there should be stipulations that say you have to get the appraisal, you have to get the deal approved with us X number of weeks or days following the purchase agreement date, whatever the confirmation or whatever the acceptance date would be, versus you're not going to use us the last minute to help you out. Or if you do, you're going to pay a premium.
I don't think the banks care as long as they're getting the business now.
Well, and on that program, I suspect they're charging more.
I don't know if they are or aren't. Maybe one of our RBC people will chime in. We have enough of them that follow us that maybe they'll provide some insight on that.
Yeah.
But, they're not just approving everybody. It goes through a standard approval process, and I'm sure that's part of the
course.
factor is what does this client's profile
You still
look
need to
like?
qualify.
Yeah, you still need to qualify, and I'm confident that they are qualifying you based on the fact that you have other equity or resources that if something happens with that, there's something else liquid or available to that lender to offset any potential losses.
Well, I don't think the qualifications of the person are in these scenarios are as big of a deal because they were probably already approved, right? They already got the approval based on the purchase
They need
price
20% more
at that rate, which is probably was maybe even more than it is now in some situations. The problem is just the appraised value.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean,
Well, so I think for the most part, the Canadian real estate sector is still really strong, and there's not as many concerns as there was or may be in the United States, especially after what they went through with their real estate market crash with all of the lenders.
Well, that was lender-based.
Yeah.
Which goes to, well, there was discussions recently and still going on where Trump is giving us a hard time because apparently American banks can't open in Canada, but I don't know that that's the case, and I'm not overly familiar with the situation. But from what I understand, it's not that they can't open here because there are American banks here. It's more that they won't prescribe to our requirements in terms of whatever
they have to
rules and regulations exist in that industry. And I think a lot of those rules and regulations are probably what has made our banking system fairly strong and predictable and reliable. And we didn't have those same scenarios. I don't think any bank has gone out of business, certainly not as a result of anything during those same times.
Yep.
But anyways, I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, the risk that the lender is taking by lending somebody money, because you said, well, they were approved before, so the approval doesn't change, but how the lender needs to look at it changes because now they are in a negative equity situation where what they've just given money for somebody to purchase is worth less than they're actually purchasing it for. If they default, they're in the hole. So there is that big consideration. What was that movie with Steve Carell?
What was it about?
A great movie with about the market crash in the States.
Big Short or something like that?
The Big Short?
I think so.
Yeah. Great movie if you haven't watched it. So this is happening, and I've had this conversation probably 10 times in the last week with some of our clients saying, well, we'd consider new construction. If I was in the market for to buy my primary residence right now, even an investment property, I would be very cautious on buying anything new construction because of the volatility that we are seeing with prices, supply, demand, interest rates. There's just too much unknown and too many ups and downs. So if you're selling a property and you are relying on the equity
that's different
from that property in order to be able to afford, close, and have a proper down payment on the new property, you really should be buying and selling in the same market.
Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen, and it has happened, and it will continue to happen over our lifetime, and I'll paint the picture for everybody. It's February of 2025. You go to the new home builder site. You put down a deposit to purchase a brand new home that's closing in March of 2026. A very realistic scenario at this moment. Let's just say the market pulls back 10%. And you bought a $2 million house and you're selling a $1.5 million house. So you planned on upgrading $500,000 or about whatever, $2,500 a month extra in mortgage payments. And you said, okay, that's okay. We can do that. Now the market pulls back 10%. So your $2 million house that you have to pay $2 million for is actually only worth 1.8 and appraised at 1.8. And now the home that you're selling is now worth 1.35 instead of 1.5. It's a $350,000 swing. That just ate up a lot of your equity.
Right? Or you may not be able to close.
And you may,
depending on your mortgage.
Depending on the equity that you've got in your home, and there's variables to that, but it puts the uncertainty.
Well, historically, for the last decade, it's been, not the last decade anymore because the last few years, but, buying new construction has almost always worked out.
Well, there were times in the 80s, there were times in the 90s, there were times in the 2000s, early 2000s. So there's always been those blips. And you cannot forecast it properly unless you're taking the risk.
But now we're seeing the swing and the financial risk is much greater. If you're buying $100,000 house in the 80s and it's now worth 80, not as big a deal as if it's 100 going down, or $1 million going down 800. So it's risky business for sure.
Well, I mean, that could be debated too, right? What was minimum wage back then? What is it now?
Yeah,
right?
I think houses have appreciated far quicker than income has, for sure.
Well, that's part of the problem in the Canadian real estate. That's why people say Canadian real estate is still in a bubble.
Yeah.
Is that the house that's worth 1.5 really should be worth $1 million or less. And even people at $1 million. And you see these homes they're posting in Texas.
Oh, I know. It's crazy.
For $500,000. Although $500,000 US is like $8 million Canadian at the moment.
Yeah.
But how do they even build it and make any money at that? And they're getting the lumber from Canada to do it.
That's how fucked up our economy is.
Thanks, Justin Trudeau. All right. I'm done for today.
All right. Fine by me. Well, at least let's leave those people in this situation with some advice. And that would be, if you're in a scenario where you can't close because of an appraisal deficiency, check with different lenders. You may find a lender that will honor the original purchase price. And I would say backing out of the deal should be your last resort, and you should consult a lawyer before you do so, because it's typically not as easy as giving up your deposit.
And, well, we'll save it for another day, but knowing the contract of what you signed and what may be possible or not possible, can you assign the unit? If so, when? What's the cost of assigning it?
Well, in this situation too, he was in his occupancy period, and he was paying $13,000 a month. Those were his occupancy fees. So wasn't even closing yet. He paid 1 month of occupancy at $13,000 and then defaulted and walked away. So now not only is he may be on the hook for his occupancy fees until closing and until they resell and get a new person in there, that could be significant. And that's only just end of last year. So he probably hasn't even seen what the outcome of that's going to be. We'll
have to contact, what's your name, Rochelle? Mm-hmm. And have her do a follow-up story a year from now to see if this person had any further consequences. Or maybe they didn't say it in the article. Maybe he did go to the builder and say, listen, I can't close on this, but I'm willing to give you my $250,000 and let me out of the deal. They may have said,
you can always try verbal agreement.
Yeah, they may have said, okay, sure. And now they may sit, because if they're in the occupancy stage, maybe they get 60% closings coming up soon and now can hold on to that unit for a couple of years because they think that the market is now going to increase. Yeah. So they may be able to sell it for even more than he paid. Who knows?
Yeah, there's some buildings where a lot of units are owned by the developer still.
Yeah. Actually, there's quite a few of them on the market right now where if you look at the seller, it's actually the builder on MLS.
Yeah.
All right, pal. Nice chat.
Good chat.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Real Estate Podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Now, if you or someone you know has ever been in the situation where a pre-construction purchase wouldn't appraise at closing and you ran into an issue, we'd love to hear about your story. So comment in this video or DM us on Instagram.